Welcome to Barsan Homestead. Today we're going to be making some baked oats and some pear milk to go on top of it. We love this for breakfast. I showed this breakfast in the Berry Burst recipe at the very back. I didn't show how to make it then because I wasn't sure if there would be an interest in it, but there has been. So I wanted to make this delicious breakfast recipe for you. One thing that I wanted to let you know about the pear milk. We use our pear milk for putting on granola, cereals of any kind. You can top it on most desserts, most fruit desserts. It's very delicious, or in our case, we love it for breakfast. In fact, we had someone come over for dinner one time and I had made some soup, and it was my favorite recipe, and the gentleman who came over, when he was eating it, he goes, "That's delicious. That tastes like health right there." Well, I can tell you that baked oats with fruit topping and pear milk, when you eat that, it is delicious, and that tastes like health right there. It's very good, and I think you'll enjoy it. When making baked oats, generally you start with your egg and you will whip up your egg. So I have 1 tablespoon of egg replacer. So you don't have to use this. You can just use 1 egg and whip up your egg at this point. So I'm going to use egg replacer, 1 tablespoon of egg replacer. And with that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of water. And that's going to give me my egg. So I'm just going to stir that up. Okay, then we're going to add the recipe calls for ½ a cup of brown sugar. I've reduced it to 1/3 of a cup, so that's 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla and ½ a teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And we're just going to mix all of that together. It's a little lumpy and clumpy right now. So what we're going to do from this point is we're going to add 1/4 cup of oil. I just use olive oil, but you can use just vegetable oil. The recipe actually calls for butter. I have been using olive oil in my cooking, but you don't have to use olive oil. I found that there was very little difference in the flavor from using butter or olive oil, so it doesn't matter. You just have to melt your butter first before you pour it in. So that was 1/4 cup of butter if you chose to use that instead. And then I'm going to use nut milk, but you could just use regular milk. And so we have 1¼ cup of milk. And we're just going to, again, mix all this. At this point, we don't want any lumps or bumps in it. We want it to be nice and smooth. Everything's nicely dissolved at this point. You can see that there's no bumps in it. And so then the last ingredient is rolled oats. And there's 3 cups of rolled oats, and so we're just going to stir those in. I use quick oats, but you can use the larger size if you want. This kind of bakes up what I would say similar to a cake. It doesn't rise, but it's very cakey kind of. It isn't like the oatmeal that you make in the morning with water and oats. That's a different consistency altogether. This is, like I say, it's more like a cake. It doesn't taste like cake, but it's very delicious all the same. So that's well combined. So now what we're going to do is take our baking casserole dish, and I never oil mine. You can if you want. It doesn't stick hardly at all, so I just don't. Just less oil in our diet. And so I'm just going to pour that in. And depending on your serving sizes, we get 2 breakfasts out of this for the 2 of us. But if you're a family, you're probably going to need to double the recipe, depending on how big your family is. But you'll get 1 breakfast out of it for sure. Okay, and I just like to pack it all down in there and just squish it all down in flat. And what the original recipe calls for is for you to leave this in the fridge overnight. But I don't. I cook it immediately. If I'm in a hurry or I know I have to do something the next morning, I might get this all ready to go and get it all pre-made. But otherwise, that's what it looks like. And I just am going to bake it right now. I have found that there's really no difference in the texture and consistency or flavor by baking it immediately. So you can do it however you want. And also, once it's baked, you can freeze it from there, and just you could even put it in smaller servings if you're a single person and you wanted to try this, and just bake it in the single servings and then put those in the freezer and just take out the single serving that you need, put it in the oven and reheat it. And because that's all I do on the set, this will get, like I said, 2 breakfasts out of this. The next day I just take and pop the whole thing from the fridge right into the oven and just rewarm it on 300 for about half an hour, something like that. So we're just going to bake that at 350 for 40 minutes. And then we'll be back. So while the baked oats are cooking, we're going to get started making our pear milk. And the first thing you're going to need is a good blender. The second thing that is an unusual ingredient is, it's not common in a lot of recipes, but it's raw cashews. And these are very healthy. They substitute for fat, but we use them to substitute for our dairy. And how we do that is by blending them. So when you purchase them, make sure you're getting the bits and pieces. You don't want to pay for the whole ones. They're more expensive. But these ones are less expensive if you buy them when they're already broken, and they're just little bits and pieces. So we're just going to add them to the blender. And I like to add 1/3 cup of nut milk. You don't have to add this if you don't want. If you want your pear milk to be nice and thick, you don't have to, but I just add a little nut milk just to thin it out. Just a little tiny bit. And what you want to make sure to do is to not add too much liquid to start with. What you're going to need for pears is either, if you can your own pears, you're going to use 1 quart, or I bought 796 ml can of pears, and that would be 28 ounces. So I just bought canned pears from the grocery store, and that's all these are. So you can do the same thing. But fresh pears, like fresh canned pears, are really nice as well. So I'm just going to take and add just a little bit of that liquid. And you can see there's just a little bit in there. And the reason you don't want to add a lot of liquid is because your nuts don't blend. They tend to just spin around in circle, and they won't chop up very good. And so this way there's just a little bit of milk, a little bit of juice in there from the pears, and then we're just going to blend that. Okay, I'm just going to turn it on one more time just to make sure the nuts are very creamy. We don't want chunks of nuts in our milk if we can help it. Okay, that should do on that part. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. You can see that it's still just got a little bit of chunky bits of nut and stuff in there, but you can see that it's turning very creamy. And that's what we're looking for. So at this point, if you drop your pears in, a lot of times it will sploosh on you. I'm just going to try and add them a little bit at a time here. like that. Okay, so now the pears are in with the nut mix. And we're just going to turn those back on to blend. Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, you can see that it's really nice and thick and creamy. So we're just going to add that to a jar. So this is our baked oats, fresh out of the oven. You can see they're golden brown, and they have a firm consistency on the top. And you can test them if you need to. 40 minutes pretty much does it, but you would just put your knife in or a toothpick, and if it comes out clean, then you know it's done. But let's get that served up. Thank you for joining me today as we made baked oats together. I hope you'll give it a try, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye. God bless.